Today on the Kawartha Small Business Podcast, we're going to talk about the economics of small business and life, and we might even crack the secret of life. I'm Brian Rump.
I'm Matt Garrity of Matty G Digital.
And this is the Kawartha Small Business Podcast. We have business conversations for the Kawartha commute. This episode is sponsored by Starting Point Digital Marketing. You know you should be doing digital marketing, but you never seem to have the time to do it right. Your small business deserves to have good digital marketing that is quick, easy, and inexpensive. Starting Point Digital Marketing provides intentionally simple marketing designed just for you. Head over to startingpointdigitalmarketing.ca to get started now. All right, Matt, what is the meaning of life?
It's love, Brian.
Love.
It's love, and
close.
it's growing humans, creating children, I think, personally, and to grow families and continue to contribute to this world. That's what it's all about.
And so it's not just about money
Well,
and
that
economics.
helps. It's fun. What's the quote that the country song from a couple years ago? Money doesn't buy happiness, but it can buy me a boat.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty cool. Like, money isn't everything, but it still does do some pretty cool things.
Yeah, so money is it's definitely a tool. You can't buy happiness, but you can, buy the things you need, and you do need a certain amount of money. It's a tool we have. It's not necessarily everything, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. We talk about small business. Economics is a thing that a lot of people talk about. I don't think many people understand what it is, but it's a fun topic at parties. And I think sometimes we forget what the meaning of life is. So I think the meaning of life is to build a happy life, and you have to build a happy life. You need a certain amount of money, I think, to do that. But the meaning of life isn't just to hustle, make money, and then die. Like, you have to do what makes you happy, and we got some strategies to help you figure out what that is.
Yeah, like, neither of us will ever advocate for hustle culture in personal, professional conversations, nor on this podcast. So,
yeah, and I think that's partly because we've learned a bit about maybe our own happiness and what that is. So to start out, if we want to sort of lay some groundwork, if we talk about economics, so there's a reason why sort of calling it economics of life. So do you know what economics is?
I was laughing when you're like, economics is a great thing to talk about at parties. I'm like, we're going on the different types of parties, man.
Yeah,
I'm going to talk about economics. I would basically equate economics with finance and financial aspects of business in general.
Yeah, so that's I think a popular answer. It's kind of more than that. So
That's like a nice way of saying
spot.
you're wrong. But
yeah. Everyone always hears, "Oh, economics means big business," but personally, I think economics is one of those foundations that everybody should get a foundation in, sort of economics and some economic concepts. I teach economics at Fleming College, I teach sort of intro to microeconomics and international economics and finance, and I always sort of go through a bit of an exercise with my students just to understand what economics is, because it's really easy to get sucked into some sort of financial topic.
sure.
But there's it's all around us, so it's kind of like the Force in Star Wars. It's like the force that surrounds us all, binds us all together, which is kind of cool. But in there's sort of a secret to happiness, I think. So economics is really, the study of a couple of things, which is production, consumption, and transfer of wealth. So, how money moves around, resources move around. We have a few broader concepts, which are, supply and demand, which a lot of people have heard. Oh, supply and demand. We talk about scarcity, incentives, and purchasing power. And the economic question that sort of brings all this together is balancing unlimited wants with limited resources. Uh, so that's, the base economic question. So if you think of big business, or countries love to talk about the economy and what we can and can't afford and all the things we're doing for the economy, as if it's an entity that we've all pledged our allegiance to. It's about that balance of dealing with unlimited wants with limited resources.
Interesting. You do hear that used a lot, like the economy, like you said, being a part of society or an oath that we've sworn. Oh, I can't get a job right now, because the economy. What does that even mean?
Yeah, and it's funny because the other thing, it can be very political. And what frustrates a lot of economists is just how bad economics is explained in
Mm.
sort of the news and the media. Most economists we see and read about aren't really economists. They're usually like paid spokespeople for an industry group or political party. And all they're really doing is spouting out the talking points of what that is. And they try to, make it make sense logically, for the economy, which gets people to sort of do what they want and buy into it.
Yeah, you've seen over the last 4 years talk of the economy being directly related to the stock exchange. And this is from super outsider view, of course. I don't know anything about economics. I'm hanging on for dear life in this conversation with you. But like I'm just thinking about like what you just described. Like more often than not, and this is not to like shade Trump, not that that's an issue, but it seems like whenever he's talking about the economy and the great things that he says he's done for the economy, he points to the stock market, which I don't think is the most appropriate barometer as to what's going on.
No, so two things. Yeah, it's not a good barometer really of what's going on. It's an indication of people buying stocks on a secondary market, which is just one of those kind of weirdly made up things.
Yeah.
When you realize how much stuff is just imaginary, like borders are imaginary, money is imaginary.
I'm
Like,
glad you said money is imaginary because I didn't know if we were going to go on to that conspiracy theory, but we could go there if you want.
yeah, well, we don't have to go too far down that road, but I think understanding a lot of these things helps us, crack that happiness code a little bit. Um, because I think the other reason is with Trump doing that is it feeds into a story that people can understand, right?
Sure.
I'm doing good, stocks are doing good, it's because of me. Really, it's not. And I think with economics, I call it the economics bros. They'll get all on like we have to do this for the economy, and sometimes it's based on like a first year model of say supply and demand, and it makes sense on paper. Or as a book I read called Good Economics for Hard Times calls it napkin economics. So people look at it, it makes sense, but really there's so many factors at play, it's wrong. And when you talk to real economists, and I will also say I am not a real economist, I don't have the academic or research credentials to claim to be an economist. Most of them don't make a lot of solid claims because they just prove everything wrong. So it's just one of those funny, they joke about you teach intro to macroeconomics and you teach all these models. And basically you try not to just go down rabbit holes of explaining also why it's wrong the whole time. Um, so we buy into these myths of like what is economics and what is the economy. And one of my other favorite sayings is like, in this economy,
Yeah.
right? My whole life, I don't think anyone's ever been like, man, this economy is so great right now.
Yeah.
Everyone's always like, oh, in this economy, like things are bad. We have to wait for you know, the economy to get going again before we can do whatever. Um, and yeah, people go through ups and downs, but most people don't know they're in the good times until they look back at it, or they don't know they're in bad times because it doesn't affect them.
Yeah, it's like people talking about the real estate bubble where we are, or Ontario, Canada. I don't know close to or a fraction of what you know about that or in economics or the economy, but I remember since I don't know how old I was, 5, 10 years old, people talking about buying real estate and well, hopefully I make money on it and hopefully like the bubble doesn't burst. Bubble hasn't ever burst. I'm 33 years old, 32 years old, whatever. It's
Has
not
it
happening.
burnt
So
in your lifetime?
yeah, like so.
So yeah, I mean, this is another conversation, but it totally burst in the sort of late '80s, early '90s. And I remember my parents, we tried to move, and it took 3 years to sell our house because that was when there was a big correction. But yeah, I think that gets a little specific. And the thing about bubbles in general is you'll have lots of people predicting them. They may or may not be true, but again, a lot's made up and it's perception.
Mhm.
And sometimes when bubbles burst, it's you know uh, they can be made worse by people just believing it. Right, stuff starts going down. Everyone thinks it's going to go way down, so everybody sells, and it sort of makes it worse.
The business
But
of
in terms
fear.
business of fear, but in terms of sort of just back to some core economic um, like concepts and the sort of the secret of life is the balancing the unlimited wants with limited resources is, I think, when we clearly understand that statement and we clearly understand what our resources are and clearly understand what our wants are, it becomes a lot easier to sort of find out what that happiness is for us. A lot of people I see who are unhappy or who are never feel accomplished, usually it's because you know they don't have enough resources or they're trying to collect more resources, and they might be spending money or dissatisfied with some of their wants, and some of those maybe aren't even really their wants. They're things they might think they should want. If we look at real estate, we've as a society done a good job of trying to tell people if you don't own a house, you're not a good person. Um, but I think that's not true for everybody. Some people like that. Some people, their parents sort of push them into home ownership, and then, they can't afford it and they're slaving away, you know, trying to, pay for something they don't necessarily want or doesn't, bring them happiness. So a lot of that is just figuring out what it is that you do want and what makes you happy, and then knowing the resources you need to get that, um, and making some decisions around maybe you need to do something different to earn more money. Maybe you don't.
Yeah, and I wonder what comes first for an entrepreneur and someone that wants to be a business owner. Is it the desire to make more money, or is it the desire to create something new?
Yeah, so I think this is a good because we sort of using the word money, but when we look at resources,
Mm.
you know, we look at things like time, money, can be other sort of methods of wealth. But I think, there's everyone gets into it for different reasons. If it's more money, or it could just be, I have a clear idea how much money I need to survive. And then within that sort of bubble, I want to choose what, makes me happy and how I spend my time. So, Kawarthas and the small business, a lot of people are doing business here for the lifestyle,
Hmm.
right? Not everyone is in, small business in downtown Lindsay. You're probably not going to be a billionaire, right? And people are okay with that, but you want to create a life that's happy and you need a certain amount of money to do that. So when you clearly know what that is, you can start building some other decisions around that. When you have friction between sort of your wants and resources, that's where sort of the trouble is, and you might need some help or, go through the process of sort of redefining what, those wants are or the resources you need to get those wants.
Yeah, because like, can you imagine the amount of time you'd have to put in to become a billionaire? You'd be 20 hours a day, not eating lunch, not eating dinner, not seeing your family. You could
Yeah,
do
it
it. I think
depends.
all like probably most people are capable of doing it. And it's just about the time that's required. I don't think people realize the amount of time that's required. I think we see these billionaires and these rich people, we put them on a pedestal and we think like, oh man, like they've got the greatest life. They're doing whatever they want. And in certain
Yeah.
circumstances they are, but they grind it really hard for probably a long time.
Yeah, there's always more to the story. I mean, I also like the quote that you can't really make a billion, you have to take a billion. Like there's, you know, a lot of it's luck along the way, right time, right place, being positioned well. So, billionaires maybe not the measure we look at, but, even to be a millionaire, even if you start with some privilege and some wealth and assets, like you're still doing things, you're still taking risks, you're how you manage your resources, I guess, is relative to what your wants are. And if the lifestyle you want requires, $1 million a year in income, like you need to do those things, right? So I see people who aren't happy because they work, a $20 an hour job and they want to have a big house, fancy truck, and they want to go on luxury vacations. And it's like, well, guess what? Like you can't do that with that level of resources. So you need to, adjust your lifestyle um, somehow for that and, build the life that you want.
Yeah, so like you're either adjusting your lifestyle to spend less on your day to day type of things so you can do those luxury vacations, or you're adjusting your lifestyle to find a way to make more money to accommodate it.
Yeah. So it's these sort of series of decisions. Some other sort of links into the concept of utility. So in economics, we measure utility with these sort of imaginary units called utils, and it's different for everybody. So sometimes the best example is you watch somebody buy something and you're just like, what an idiot. Like, why did they spend so much money on this stupid thing? Well, to them, that's not a stupid thing, and they get joy and utility from
Right.
that. It'd be a fun experiment for both of us to go to into bulk Burns Bulk Food with $10 each and see what each other buys, with that $10. It's one of the best sort of like ways to measure your utility. Like, do you go right to like the salty licorice station or do you go to like something that tastes good? Um,
Salty licorice.
yeah. So like that's, just one of those good examples of understanding for you what that utility is and how you rank, how you spend your money on those things.
It's true. And I think it's all perspective of what each individual person wants out of their life. Like you said, like things that you're interested in, desires that you have, passions that you have, that I often will be like, I have no interest in that. It's like opinions. We all have them. No one's right. No one's wrong. It is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you really define, yeah, those things that make you happy, what you want, you define what the resources you need to get there is, you could start deciding how you use your time, to get there. And I think a lot of people get stuck kind of on a runaway train sometimes of working in the grind to make more money, maybe to buy stuff they don't really want, or they get into traps where they've incurred a lot of debt buying stuff that they think they want, and now they're behind. So they have to work harder to catch up on it and pay for stuff that they wanted 5 years ago, even though they didn't. And it's just a recipe for unhappiness. So you can sort of, make some of those changes and understand, what it is you need to do.
Yeah, and just to maybe go off course a tiny bit here and advocate for entrepreneurship, I found that's been one of the eye-opening things that I've encountered the last few years, and recognizing how people get into that trap of spending maybe too much money that they don't have, and then they're constantly running uphill to try to pay that off in a job where they're only making X amount of dollars. If they work harder, it's the same amount of money. They're not getting rewarded for working a lot harder. They're not really getting, what's the opposite of rewarded? For not working as hard as they are. There's no incentive for it.
Incentives, which there's is an economic concept, right? The incentives of,
It's one of the great things about being an entrepreneur is if you overspend or you have a dream that you want something, it's kind of on you to figure out how to get there and figure out the resources to get there. Like if you all of a sudden wanted to purchase another vehicle and there's literally no way as an employee person you can afford it with the salary that you're making, you're going to put yourself in a hole, or you're going to hope at the end of the year that you can beg for a raise. If you're an entrepreneur, it's kind of on you to be like, okay, I got to find a way to make some more money, make some more resources to get to that point. And I find that very exciting. It's fun. It's enjoyable. I kind of joke with my wife about it every once in a while, where she's like, something will come up, maybe with the kids or something. She's like, do we have money for this? I'm like, I'll go find a way to make more money.
Yeah. And that's part of cracking the code and why entrepreneurship can be so enjoyable. And also when you know what those wants are, or they change and you know the link, you're not pouting because you can't afford, the King Ranch truck or whatever. But if you want that, okay, here's what I have to go and do. And you could figure out how to use your time for that. This sort of links us into opportunity costs, which is another thing that people don't always understand. And opportunity cost is everything we do, the cost of it is sort of the next best alternative with that time. So, if you could be making $100 an hour, but you take a job that pays you $25 an hour, the opportunity costs is that you're losing $75 per hour. The same as with your time as well. And this is where I worked for a guy who had a great outlook. He loved vacationing with his kids in the cottage, and campfires on Saturday night was like his thing that he loved. And he said there's 8 Saturdays a year, basically, in the summer where you could have fires if the weather's good. So maybe you really only get 6. So 6 fires a year are like the happiest times with his life. So if they got like a wedding invitation, it was like that wedding invitation costs, 1/6 of my time with my prime time with my kids per year. So they would use that as their decision-making process of like, do we go or do we just send a gift?
Yeah, that's interesting. And as soon as you started saying that, I thought back to something that happened to me right away from a pricing perspective, where I came into the market with my marketing intentionally not cheap, but it's intentionally very affordable. Because I was like just desperate to get growing as fast as humanly possible and to scale and like make money, because I was the only person in my home bringing in revenue for my 2 kids and my wife and in our home. So I was anxious to do that. And I was pricing stuff like probably like 40% less than competitors. And just to put it in perspective, from a social media perspective, I was charging like $600 less per month for social media costs. And people weren't even thinking about it at first. Like I talked to them, they liked me, boom, you'd make that sale by the end of the conversation. But then as things started to grow for me and I got busier and I started to recognize I'm it's not a great thing in general. I'm actually losing like $600 a month. It
Yeah,
wasn't
you're
like
subsidizing them. And if I, this is maybe a podcast for other times, but you are transferring your wealth to them by
yeah,
doing that.
yeah, it was very eye opening just when I came to that realization that I priced it way wrong. It should have been, it's still less than competitors for the most part. But it's still, you're not throwing $600 away every month, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's more comparable.
Yeah. And it's finding that magic formula,
Right.
right? And knowing again what your opportunity costs are and, choosing that. I know, people who they don't just go after every piece of business they can. They set their price, and it can be a reasonable price, but then they choose who they work with. To a large degree, I do that. I say no to a lot of stuff just because I don't want to, use my time doing that. And it's really, it's a good strategy to sort of live the life you want to live.
I agree. I think some businesses are a numbers game. Retail specifically, you need that walk-in traffic. You need to deal with everybody. You need everyone to buy from you. Service-based businesses, I think it's different. And I'll speak for myself. Like it's, I guess, part of the economics conversation where I've recognized you work with people that you know right away aren't a good fit, and they become a problem. And down the road, you know you're going to get fired or you're going to have to let go of them even, and like that's an issue. It's You're much better off in a lot of cases to be very particular with who you're working with from a service perspective, because it can add so much grief to your life.
Yeah, and retail, I'll just counter you, is kind of the same, and you can choose your product mix, you can choose your location, you can choose your prices to cater to who you want to,
True.
for the most part, deal with. Obviously, you're going to sell it to everyone, but if you're, selling Prada in Yorkville, the people who are going to be walking by and coming in that store and that you're attracting are different than, maybe another product that you want.
True. Absolutely.
Just sort of as we get close to the end of our commute, another concept I think a lot of entrepreneurs forget about, and people in general, is the concept of sunk costs and what we call the sunk cost fallacy. And that's where we should just ignore any sunk costs into something, whereas a lot of people will keep pursuing something that's maybe dragging them down or failed because they've already put some money into it. They've spent money on it and they want to make it, live. This could be, a lot of things. One of the best ways to talk about it is if you've ever gone out, I'm sure you've gone out to dinner at a restaurant and you've ordered dessert.
Yes.
And you're really full, but you want to try that brownie or that dessert, and it shows up and it's massive. And you're like, uh-oh. And then you just jam it all down your throat and you feel terrible. Well, an economist might take one bite, enjoy it, and put it off to the side. Because no matter what you do with that, you're not getting the money back. So you've spent that money. So when you look forward at your utility and your joy from something, you should make your future decisions based on that, not based on what you paid for it. So if you take one bite and enjoy it and you're good, that's great. If you don't finish it, the restaurant's not refunding you. They're not saying, "Oh, you had one bite out of 100, so we're going to give you 99% back. So, it's the same with businesses. I think marketing is probably a good example. It's like, oh, I paid this company so much money already. It's not working, but I'm just going to keep going with them because, I've already invested money with them. Whereas really, your decision should have nothing to do with what you put in to it. You have to, go forward with the best decision.
You often say profound things to me via text, even. Like you said something to me yesterday. I forget exactly what it was, but I was like, that's really deep. I really enjoy this. That was one of the more profound things you've ever said, and relatable of stuffing a massive dessert down your throat when you're already stuffed. It happened to me a couple weeks ago at Pane Vino. I was like so full. I had zero interest in dessert, but I could not eat the tiramisu there.
Yeah, it's so good.
And I just stuffed it in my pie hole, and I felt so sick. And to your point, I should have ordered it. I should have eaten like a quarter of it, a couple bites. And at that point, like you said, the money isn't going anywhere. It's already gone. I should maximize my enjoyment and not make myself more sick.
Yeah, and that's one of those. It's a good, a night at Pane Vino is going to cost you X amount of dollars, no matter what you do. So you might as well spend that and then manage your enjoyment.
Yes.
So awesome. Any other thoughts we have today?
No. I hope that I did not sound like too big of an idiot talking about economics. There were moments there where I just sat thinking, I hope Teacher Brian doesn't call on me to answer, but
I think this was a lot of fun for me. There's a few concepts we didn't quite get to, but I think this is probably different than any economics conversation people might have expected from the title of the episode. To me, economics is fun this way. It's not all about broing down on the economy and real estate investing and whatever the latest trend is to try to make dudes give you a bunch of money and lose it all. And it makes you fun at parties, which if any of my students are listening, economics makes you fun at parties is the right answer on the quiz. It's true. Please don't put faults on that.
I was going to say, we can't call this topic economics. No one's going to listen to it. Well, let me work on that.
All right. Well, that sounds like an episode to me. If you want to talk more about economics, life, and happiness, and if you want to know how to crack the code to the secret of life, let us know. Reach out at setitup@coorthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca.